So imagine you're a private investigator,
Right.
right? You've just been hired by a very wealthy, very well-connected political operative.
Okay.
And your job is to track down a woman who has just made some, really explosive, highly publicized legal allegations against your boss's boss.
Right. High-stakes job.
Exactly. So your mission is to find out who she is, where she lives, her background, all of that. You get the legal paperwork she filed, and you find the home address she listed. It's in the Bronx.
Okay, so you head over there.
Right. You drive across town, you navigate the traffic, and you pull up to the address. You're fully expecting to see, I don't know, an apartment building or a townhouse. But instead, you put the car in park, you look out the window, and you're just staring at an empty, flat, concrete parking lot.
Just a parking lot where?
Yeah. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we are taking this massive stack of investigative reporting notes, interviews, and deep background sources, and we are looking at the hidden rules that govern the ultra-wealthy and the ultra-powerful.
And I have to say, it's a fascinating and, frankly, a pretty unsettling pile of sources we have today.
Yeah, to say the least.
Because when we really look at these documents, what we're looking at is, like, a completely different set of physics. I mean, when we are kids, the rules of the playground are pretty simple.
Sure, you break a rule, you get in trouble.
Exactly. If you break a window, you're in trouble. If you push someone off the swings, you're the bully, and the teacher puts you in timeout. And those rules apply to everyone. The tallest kid in the 5th grade and the smallest kid in the 1st grade get treated the same.
Right, that's the ideal.
But as we grow up and as we look at the actual systems that run our politics, our justice system, the highest institutions, that playground logic entirely falls apart.
It totally shatters. And that is exactly what our mission is today.
Yeah.
We want to take these incredibly dark, complex, adult topics.
Yeah.
Things like massive legal secrets, international abuse networks, political cover-ups in Washington, D.C., and we're going to break down the actual mechanics of how they work, but explain it simply, like we're explaining it to a 10-year-old.
I love that approach, because if you strip away the legal jargon and the, congressional procedures and all the political spin,
noise.
Yeah, the noise, what you are left with is really just a very big, very dangerous version of schoolyard bullies, secret clubs, and kids who just change the rules when they start losing the game.
Exactly. So here's the blueprint for today. We're going to look at 3 main areas from the sources. First, we have the mystery of a vanished lawsuit involving some of the most famous names in the country.
Right.
Then we'll get into the little architecture of an illegal trap that was designed to ensnare vulnerable people. And finally, we'll look at the behind-the-scenes brawls happening right now in Washington, all the way up to the vice president's office.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to go right back to that empty parking lot in the Bronx, because that is where the sources begin our first story.
Right, the Katie Johnson case.
Yeah. So this involves an allegation made by a woman using the legal pseudonym Katie Johnson. She filed her lawsuit as a Jane Doe. And the core of the allegation is that she was assaulted by Donald Trump in 1994 when she was 13 years old at a townhouse owned by Jeffrey Epstein.
And we need to be very clear here, right out of the gate.
Yes, absolutely. The sources are crystal clear on the response here. Donald Trump has categorically and entirely denied these claims. When he was asked about it on the record, he called the allegations complete nonsense, uses some very strong expletives, and he maintained that it was just a total fabrication.
Right. And that absolute denial is a massive piece of the context here. We have to keep that impartial baseline.
Definitely.
But what the investigative notes really focus on is the strange, erratic trajectory of the lawsuit itself. I mean, it wasn't just filed and then immediately dismissed by a judge.
No, it was filed 3 separate times.
Exactly, 3 times in different jurisdictions. And then right before a highly publicized press conference, like literally scheduled just days before the 2016 presidential election, the lawsuit was suddenly and completely dropped by the plaintiff.
And this is where that empty parking lot comes into play. The sources detail how Michael Cohen, who at the time was widely known as Donald Trump's fixer, got involved.
Right, he was the guy handling these things.
Yeah. So Cohen is tasked with figuring out who this Katie Johnson is. He deploys a private investigator to go to her listed address. And the PI just finds a slab of concrete.
Just a parking lot.
Right. So if we are thinking about this using our simple playground logic, first of all, why does someone even use a fake name on a serious legal document? I mean, if you are taking someone to court, why are you allowed to be a Jane Doe?
Well, think of a Jane Doe filing like putting on a secret superhero mask.
Okay.
But you aren't putting on the mask to go out and fight crime, right?
Yeah.
You are putting on the mask so you can tell a very scary truth without the biggest, most powerful bully in the school knowing exactly who you are.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. Our legal system actually recognizes that in certain, highly sensitive cases, especially ones involving allegations of severe abuse, the person coming forward is in immense danger of retaliation.
So it's basically a shield.
Exactly.
It's like you're raising your hand to tell the principal that the kid whose parents practically own the school did something terrible.
Mhm.
But the rules say you are allowed to stand behind a curtain while you say it.
That's a perfect way to put it. Because if the system forces you to stand right out in the open, the fear of what that powerful person might do to you would probably stop you from ever raising your hand in the first place.
Right, you just stay quiet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the role of a fixer, like Michael Cohen was at the time. Because mechanically speaking, what is a fixer?
Right, because it's not like that's a real job title. You don't go to college to get a degree in fixing.
No, you definitely don't. But, okay, let's go back to the playground. Imagine a very rich, very popular kid who throws a rock and breaks the principal's window.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
This kid has a best friend whose entire purpose, like their only real job on the playground, is to make sure the teacher never, ever finds out who threw that rock. That best friend is the fixer.
Okay, so the fixer goes to work. They might take their lunch money and pay off the kid who saw the rock being thrown.
Right, a payoff.
Or if the kid won't take the money, the fixer walks up to them and says, if you tell the teacher, I'm going to make sure nobody in this school ever plays with you again, I will make your life miserable.
Precisely. Their job is to make the problem vanish using whatever levers of pressure they have at their disposal.
Man, that's heavy.
It is. And this explains the empty parking lot perfectly. When Cohen's private investigator reported back that the address was fake, the sources say there was intense frustration on their end. But put yourself behind that Jane Doe shield for a second.
Right. In her shoes.
If you are terrified of the person you are accusing, if you know they have immense wealth and power, and they have people whose sole job is to protect them, the absolute last thing you are going to do is write down your actual home address on a public piece of paper.
Oh, totally. Because if you put your real address on that paper, you're giving the bully the combination to your locker.
Exactly.
You're telling them exactly where you sleep. You are practically drawing a map for their fixers and their private eyes to come knock on your front door. So yeah, you write down an empty parking lot in the Bronx.
It is a purely defensive maneuver. And the sources highlight that this fear, it isn't just paranoia. It's based on real historical precedent.
Like what?
Well, other victims of Jeffrey Epstein's network, like a woman identified in court documents as Jane Doe 1, they've gone on the record detailing how private investigators literally stalked them.
Seriously?
Yeah, they followed them to the grocery store, they took photos of their families, and in some cases, they nearly ran them off the road. So, writing down a fake address isn't proof that the person making the accusation doesn't exist or that they're lying. It's proof that they are trying to survive the process of coming forward.
I hear that. I really do. But I want to push back on this a little bit, just playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
If I put myself in the shoes of like a regular person, a juror, or just someone reading the news trying to make sense of this, if someone is telling the absolute truth about something horrific happening to them, it feels inherently suspicious to use a fake name and point people to an empty piece of concrete.
You mean, why not just be totally transparent?
Yeah. Why not just stand up, walk into the sunlight, point your finger and say, this is what happened and here's who I am? Doesn't hiding in the shadows make it look like you're just, making the whole thing up for attention?
That's a really common reaction. And what's fascinating here is a concept that legal experts and sociologists in the sources refer to as the credibility deficit.
The credibility deficit. Okay, what's that?
Let's take it right back to the playground. Imagine you are the brand new kid at school. You don't have any friends yet, your family doesn't have a lot of money, and you're pretty quiet.
Okay.
Now imagine you go to the teacher and you say that the school's star quarterback, the handsome kid, the kid whose dad bought the school its new scoreboard, the kid everyone loves.
The popular kid.
You tell the teacher that he cornered you and stole your lunch money.
Oh, I know exactly what happens. The teacher's going to look at the star quarterback, then look at the quiet new kid, and almost instantly doubt the new kid.
Right.
The teacher's brain just doesn't want to believe the beloved quarterback is a thief.
That is the credibility deficit in action. In the adult world, if a very powerful, famous, wealthy person and a regular, everyday citizen tell conflicting stories, the crowd almost always defaults to believing the powerful person first.
That makes a lot of sense, sadly.
The regular person doesn't just have to tell their story. They have to actively prove they aren't a liar. They start the game with a negative score.
While the powerful person's denial is treated as, like, solid gold.
Exactly.
When someone like Trump says it was nonsense, millions of people immediately accept that as the absolute truth. While the regular person's accusation is treated as flimsy, malicious gossip until they can somehow, impossibly prove otherwise.
And the burden of proof placed on that regular person is incredibly heavy. It's almost crushing. They have to find witnesses from events that happened decades ago. They have to provide exact dates and exact times.
Which is so hard.
And worst of all, they have to endure a process where the powerful person's lawyers dig into every single aspect of their past. I mean, every mistake they ever made, every bad relationship, every financial struggle, it all gets dragged into the public square to paint them as a crazy, greedy liar.
Sounds like an exhausting, terrifying, and deeply traumatic process.
It really is.
And it's crucial to remember that our goal here today isn't to play judge and jury on this specific allegation. We said the denial is on the record.
Right. We are remaining totally impartial on the facts of the claim itself.
Exactly. What we are exploring is the system. Why do cases like this, cases involving massive structural power imbalances, so often end up just vanishing into thin air? Why do people go through the trouble of filing a lawsuit 3 times only to drop it right before the finish line?
Which transitions us perfectly to the lawyers involved in this case. The investigative sources include a very revealing interview with a man named Cheney Mason.
Okay, who is he?
He was one of the lawyers who actually represented Katie Johnson. And this interview took place nearly a decade after the lawsuit was dropped, so it offers a lot of retrospective insight.
So in our playground analogy, a lawyer is supposed to be your champion.
Yes.
They are the big, tough, older sibling you bring with you when you finally go to talk to the principal. But in this case, even her own champion is looking around saying, I have no idea what happened.
Right.
The sources say Cheney Mason is on the record saying that his legal team flew her out from California. They sat with her in a room for days. They didn't just take her word for it. They hired their own private investigators to double-check her story.
To look into her background before they ever filed the official paperwork.
Yeah. Let's talk about that vetting process for a second. Mason said his team investigated her aggressively before taking the case. How does that actually work behind closed doors? Why do lawyers interrogate their own clients?
Let's go back to the schoolyard. If you run to the teacher and say, Billy hit you, a good teacher doesn't just immediately run out and expel Billy.
Right.
The teacher pulls you aside and starts asking rapid-fire questions. Where were you standing? Which hand did he use? Who else was on the playground? What time was it exactly?
Right. Trying to poke holes in it.
Exactly. They do this over and over from different angles. That is vetting. They are stress testing your story to make sure it doesn't crack or change before they take the serious step of punishing another student.
Because in the adult world, the stakes for the lawyer are massive.
Yeah.
I mean, if a lawyer goes to a federal judge with a completely fabricated story, the lawyer gets sanctioned. They can lose their license to practice law. They could be sued for defamation. They have their own careers and their own reputations to protect.
Exactly. Lawyers at that high level are not going to risk their entire livelihood on a story they think is just a flimsy cash grab. So they interrogate their own client first. They play the role of the bully's lawyer.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, they try to tear the story apart in the safety of their office to see if it holds up. And Cheney Mason is saying that after days of that intense, hostile questioning, and after his own private eyes looked into her, he fully believed her.
And his quote in the sources is really striking. He said, verbatim, "There is no doubt in my mind she told the truth."
Right. But in the same breath, he admits he doesn't know where she is today.
Yeah. He hopes she is alive. He doesn't know the exact mechanism of why she dropped the suit, though another high-profile lawyer involved in the case, Lisa Bloom, cited that the client was receiving intense, terrifying threats.
Right.
So right before the big game, right before the press conference where she was supposed to finally step out from behind the Jane Doe shield, she just vanished. She dropped the case. Mason basically says, my teammate ran off the field in the 4th quarter, and I don't know where she went.
Think about the psychological weight of that moment.
Okay.
Imagine you actually managed to gather the courage to stand up to the most popular, powerful kid in school. You tell the teacher, you get your champion, you practice your story, you are ready.
We're all set.
But suddenly, when you were walking home from school, A bunch of grown adults you've never seen before start following you. They sit in cars outside your house. They take pictures of you through your windows.
Oh,
They
man.
start knocking on your neighbors' doors, asking weird questions about your family. The schoolyard bully sends a very clear, very quiet message.
Yeah.
If you don't shut your mouth, your family is going to get hurt.
And that is the exact type of intimidation the sources talk about regarding Epstein's orbits, right?
Mm-hmm.
The private investigators acting as, like, shadow enforcers. The implicit threats of physical or financial ruin.
Exactly. Faced with that kind of organized terror, wouldn't you just want to disappear? Wouldn't you just want to drop the whole thing, change your phone number, move to a different state, and live a quiet life where nobody's following you?
That, absolutely.
You aren't retreating because you lied. You are retreating because the cost of telling the truth has escalated to a threat against your actual survival.
It's heartbreaking. It really is. It illustrates so clearly that having the truth on your side isn't always enough if the other side has a limitless bank account, an army of fixers, and a team of investigators.
No, it's not enough at all in these systems.
And that dark reality leads us directly into understanding how these systems of exploitation are actually built. Because
Yeah.
these power balances aren't accidents, right? They are designed.
Very deliberately designed.
Let's talk about the architecture of a trap. How do people like Jeffrey Epstein actually build systems to catch and keep vulnerable people?
The sources outline a massive international pipeline that Epstein constructed for the sole purpose of exploiting young girls. This wasn't, a crime of opportunity. It was a highly organized, industrialized system.
Like a machine.
Yes, and the key to understanding this is looking at the specific mechanical methods he used to build the pipeline.
So one of the primary mechanisms was a modeling agency called MC Squared, which Epstein reportedly bankrolled and ran in partnership with a man named Jean-Luc Brunel.
Right.
And they used this legitimate-looking business to lure young foreign girls.
If we look at the psychology of a predator, they are always, always looking for the easiest possible target. They do not want a fair fight.
Right.
They don't want to target someone who has a strong support system, someone who knows their rights, or someone who can easily fight back.
So they target young girls from other countries who dream of being fashion models, because a girl brought over from Eastern Europe or South America often has zero local resources.
Yeah.
She likely doesn't speak the language fluently, she doesn't have a local bank account, she doesn't know how the transit system works, and in many cases, as the sources note, these girls didn't even have physical possession of their own passports.
Which is key. The people who brought them there controlled their travel documents.
So it's forced isolation.
Exactly. If you have no money, no passport, and no friends in a foreign country, who do you run to when the wealthy businessman who brought you there starts abusing you? You can't just walk out the front door and go home. You have no playground to escape to. You are completely trapped in their ecosystem.
Wow. And the second method the sources detail is even closer to home, and honestly, it's sick. It was a literal pyramid scheme operating out of a local high school in Florida. Palm Beach Gardens High School?
Yes.
Epstein would pay a high school girl $300 to bring a friend to his mansion to give him a massage.
And we must be explicitly clear here, as the investigative sources are, that these massages were not massages. They were actual severe sexual abuse. Epstein reportedly demanded 3 of these encounters a day, running it almost like a factory shift schedule.
Let's break down this pyramid scheme using our simple logic. Explain the mechanics of this to a 10-year-old. How does a billionaire get high schoolers to recruit for him?
Imagine a terrible, twisted game on the playground. A wealthy adult pulls up and tells you that you can have a huge handful of candy, or in this real-world case, $300 in crisp cash, if you just trick one of your friends into coming over to this very big, very scary house.
Okay.
Now, to a middle-class adult with a stable job, $300 might not seem like life-changing, dangerous money. But to a 15-year-old in a neighborhood where families are struggling to make rent,
Oh, yeah.
where they might not have enough money for groceries or clothes.
To a teenager in that situation, $300 feels like $1 million. It's a fortune. It's enough to buy those new shoes everyone at school has, or to secretly help your mom pay the electric bill so the lights don't get turned off.
Exactly. The predator weaponizes poverty.
Right.
They understand exactly how much leverage a few $100s buys. They turn the victims into recruiters by dangling a prize that the victim desperately needs.
It's so manipulative.
The girls brought their friends because they needed the money, and then those friends brought their friends because they needed the money, and the cycle just expanded exponentially, feeding the pipeline.
So it's a pyramid scheme built on trauma, But here's where the sources get really interesting in a very dark way regarding how they actually got the girls to walk through the front door.
Right.
Because we grow up watching movies where the monster looks like a monster, they have sharp teeth, they live in a dark, scary cave, and they growl. But in the real world, the monsters look like fancy businessmen in tailored suits. They live in beautiful mansions with manicured lawns, and they use bait that doesn't look scary at all.
This is where Ghislaine Maxwell's role is absolutely central. The sources describe her as the primary recruiter and the manager of this pipeline. When these young girls were brought in, whether from the modeling agency or the high school, they weren't immediately greeted by a scary older man.
Right.
They were greeted by a wealthy, smiling, highly sophisticated British woman.
The sources say Maxwell would sit these girls down, offer them tea, and tell them that she and Jeffrey were just a nice family. They didn't have kids of their own, and they just wanted to use their wealth to help make these girls' dreams come true. They offered to pay for school or help them start a business.
Think of it like a Venus flytrap.
Okay.
A Venus flytrap doesn't look dangerous to a fly. It doesn't have teeth. It looks bright. It smells incredibly sweet. It offers nectar. Ghislaine Maxwell was the sweet smell. She acted like a safe, caring mother figure or a cool, rich aunt.
She disarmed them.
Systematically. Because if a teenage girl sees an older woman offering help, kindness, and a safe place to sit, she naturally feels infinitely safer than she would if an older man approached her alone.
It completely shorts out their alarm system.
Exactly.
But the moment the fly lands to drink the nectar, the moment the girl is inside the mansion, comfortable and trusting, the trap snaps shut. The doors lock. And by the time they realize what is actually happening, they are surrounded by the walls of a billionaire's fortress, and they have nowhere to run.
It is a perfect, terrifying ecosystem. They used money, they used the illusion of maternal safety, and they used the girls' own friendships against them to keep the pipeline flowing. It wasn't an accident. It was a highly managed, logistical industry of Angus.
It is chilling to read the details of how calculated it all was. But what makes this story even bigger, and frankly even more frustrating for anyone paying attention, is what happens after the trap is finally discovered.
Right, the fallout.
Because when the police and the journalists finally figure out what the biggest bully in the school has been doing, you expect the principal to expel the bully, show everyone the evidence, and make sure it never happens again, right?
You expect transparency. You expect the system to correct itself and deliver justice.
But that is not what is happening here. The sources move from the actual crimes on the ground to the massive political cover-up surrounding them in Washington. Let's talk about the government's game of hide-and-seek.
Okay. The investigative notes point specifically to the current Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson.
Right.
For years, there has been an ongoing bipartisan push from the public to release the remaining Jeffrey Epstein files. Subpoenas, flight logs, documents that could reveal the names of other highly powerful people, politicians, and billionaires who were involved in this network.
Everyone wants to see the list.
Exactly. But according to the reporting, Speaker Johnson has actively manipulated the congressional calendar twice to avoid holding a floor vote on releasing these files.
Wait, how does he do that? He literally sent members of Congress home early on a paid vacation so they wouldn't have to vote on the record.
That's right.
Let's use our playground logic to explain the mechanics of this. How can one guy just stop the government?
Imagine you're playing a really intense, high-stakes board game with a group of kids. The rules are set. Everyone is watching. You are moving your pieces, and you suddenly realize you are about to lose.
Oh.
In the next turn, the cards are going to be flipped over, and everyone in the room is going to see that you've been cheating or that your best friends have been cheating. What do you do to survive?
I mean, if I'm a sore loser, I flip the board over so all the pieces go flying.
Right. Or if you are the kid who happens to own the board game and the room you're playing in, you just look at your watch and yell, "Time for recess!" Everyone outside.
Oh.
You pack the board away, you turn off the lights, and you force everyone out the door. You physically stop the game from proceeding to the final score.
That is exactly what sending Congress home early is. The Speaker of the House controls the schedule. It's yelling, "Recess!" to stop the game. And the craziest, most insulting part is that we, the taxpayers, are the ones buying the board game. We pay these politicians' salaries. We pay for the lights in the building. And they use our money to take early vacations specifically so they don't have to show us their homework.
It is a procedural evasion tactic, and it's incredibly effective because it's technically perfectly legal within the rules of the House. And it's not just Congress playing this game.
Right, the DOJ is involved too.
Yes. The sources detail how the Department of Justice, the DOJ, handles requests for these exact same files. Journalists and everyday citizens use a mechanism called FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, to ask for government documents.
FOIA is basically a rule signed into law decades ago that says, hey, we the people actually own this government, so when we ask for the paperwork on a closed case, you have to show it to us.
Exactly. It's like asking the teacher to let you read the secret classroom diary where all the bad behavior is officially recorded. But the sources note that the DOJ makes this process agonizingly difficult. They don't just hand over the diary.
No, they stall for months, sometimes years.
They argue over legal technicalities. And when a judge finally forces them to hand over the diary, they have heavily used something called redactions.
Redactions are when they take a thick black marker and cross out words so you can't read them.
Usually, yes. But the investigative sources point out a very specific, almost sinister detail about how the FBI is handling the Epstein vaults. Instead of using traditional black digital blocks to hide the names, they are using white blocks.
Wait, why does the color of the digital block matter at all? A block is a block, right?
It matters immensely. When you use a black marker or a black digital block, researchers and journalists can often guess the length of the name based on the size of the block.
Oh, I see.
Furthermore, because of typography, you know how different letters take up different amounts of space, a concept called kerning. Experts can sometimes look at the spacing of the visible letters on either side of the black block and mathematically guess whose name fits perfectly in that gap. It leaves a physical clue.
That's wild.
But by using white digital blocks, the DOJ completely erases the spatial context. The background of the paper is white, the block is white, so it just looks like a massive featureless gap in the text. It makes it infinitely harder, mathematically and visually, to guess whose name is hiding there.
Oh, wow. So they finally hand you the secret diary you've been demanding for years, but instead of crossing things out with a marker, they've taken a pair of scissors and literally snipped out every single important name. There's even a shape to look at. It's just blank space.
Exactly.
It is deliberate, calculated obfuscation.
It is a masterclass in hiding the truth while pretending to comply with the law.
Yeah.
And then the sources look at the Senate, showing how these layers of protection go all the way up. They mention Senator Lisa Murkowski, who was a key deciding vote against releasing certain Epstein-related files.
Naturally, people ask,
Why?
why would a senator vote no in releasing evidence about a massive abuse ring?
And the investigative journalists dug into her background and connections, and this is where the web gets really sticky and uncomfortable. Murkowski is a prominent senator from Alaska. It turns out she regularly attended an Arctic Circle conference, a high-level gathering for politicians and business leaders, and at this conference, she met and spent time with Ghislaine Maxwell's husband.
Wait, really?
Yes. Maxwell's husband worked extensively in maritime trade, specifically in shipping routes involving Alaska. The sources state he had known Senator Murkowski for decades. They moved in the same circles, they had mutual friends, mutual donors, mutual interests.
Unbelievable.
So while Ghislaine Maxwell was actively managing this horrific, industrialized abuse pipeline we just talked about, her husband was rubbing elbows with powerful politicians on the conference circuit, building deep relationships.
Okay, let's use the schoolyard analogy to make this crystal clear. You are playing a competitive sport. The referee makes a completely terrible call that costs your team the game. You're furious. It makes no sense.
Right.
But then, after the game is over, you are walking to your car and you look over and see the referee sharing a juice box and laughing it up with the captain of the opposing team.
In that moment, you realize the game was never fair to begin with. The referee is secretly best friends with the opposing team's captain. That underlying connection, that invisible relationship, explains exactly why the whistle was blown a certain way when the pressure was on.
So if we pull back and look at the whole picture, what does this all mean? We have the Speaker of the House calling early recess to stop the game. We have the DOJ using invisible ink and spatial tricks to hide names. We have senators protecting people they share donors and juice boxes with.
It's a lot.
It genuinely feels like the entire system is actively designed to protect the monsters instead of the kids on the playground.
It forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question about how institutions function. Institutions, whether it's the Department of Justice, the halls of Congress, or the leadership of a major political party, operate almost like living organisms. And the first biological instinct of any living organism is self-preservation.
Sure.
They protect themselves, and they protect their wealthy, powerful ecosystem first.
Because if the whole truth comes out, if the files are released, and it turns out 20 powerful politicians were involved, the institution itself looks fundamentally corrupt and broken.
Exactly. The institution would lose its legitimacy. So they rely on a very cynical, very effective strategy: Attrition.
Attrition, just wearing people out.
Yes, wearing the enemy down. They believe that if they hide the ball long enough, if they make the FOIA process boring enough, if they change the calendar enough times, regular people will just get tired.
Well, give up.
We will get distracted by our own lives, by paying our rent, by the next crazy news cycle, and we will simply stop demanding the truth. They bank on our exhaustion.
They know we have real jobs and can't spend 10 years fighting them in court for a white-blocked document. That is so deeply cynical. But mechanically, it makes perfect sense. If you can't win the argument on the merits, just make the argument last so long that the other person gets bored and walks away.
It's highly effective.
And speaking of cynical political games, while these politicians are busy avoiding votes on terrible crimes, what are they actually spending their time, energy, and our money doing?
Well, according to the sources, they are spending their time and money fighting each other in incredibly petty, destructive ways.
Right.
The notes dive deep into the intense behind-the-scenes infighting happening right now inside the Republican Party. And the crucial takeaway here, the thing every citizen needs to understand, is that this infighting has absolutely nothing to do with helping voters, passing laws, or improving the country.
It is pure ego, pure power, and pure spite. The sources outline a massive feud involving a very prominent political consultant named Jeff Rowe.
Yes, Rowe previously worked for Ron DeSantis during his presidential run.
Right, and he ran a super PAC, which, for those who don't know, is basically a giant, legally protected bucket of dark money used to run political attack ads. And they burned through a staggering $145 million without even making it to the New Hampshire primary.
An astronomical amount of money with zero return on investment. But the issue the sources focus on isn't just the wasted money. It's the demand for absolute loyalty.
Okay.
Donald Trump's political team despises Ron DeSantis, and by extension, they deeply despise Jeff Rowe for working for him. It is a blood feud.
So because they hate this one specific consultant, Trump's team is actively backing primary challengers against any Republican politician who dares to hire Jeff Rowe's firm. They are going after their own teammates.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. They are pouring money and endorsements into candidates like Ken Paxton in Texas.
Right.
And the sources are quick to point out that Paxton is a highly controversial figure even within his own party. He is plagued by deep scandals, including past indictments for securities fraud and the fact that he was impeached by his own Republican state legislature.
Yeah, that's a lot of baggage.
Yet, despite all of that baggage, he gets the backing of the top of the party.
And he gets that backing just to punish the other guy. Just to stick it to Jeff Rowe. Okay, let's explain this consultant feud using the playground rules.
Okay. Imagine two kids arguing over who gets the prestigious title of vice captain and who gets to sit right next to the team captain on the bus to the game.
Very important stuff.
Right. Kid A is sitting in the seat. Kid B gets so mad, so consumed by jealousy and anger, that they decide to break into the coach's office, take all the money the school raised for new soccer balls and uniforms, and they spend every last dime of it printing nasty flyers just to make Kid A look stupid.
They are literally burning down their own team's clubhouse just to win a personal argument. They are destroying the team's chances to play the game.
Exactly. They are fighting over proximity to power. They don't care about actually winning the soccer game against the rival school. They just care about who holds the shiny title within their own little circle. The ego has completely consumed the mission.
And the sources say this petty infighting, this revenge campaign, is going to cost the party millions and millions of dollars in primary races across the country. Money that could have been spent on, I don't know, literally anything else. Fixing roads, helping schools, or even just running normal campaigns.
Yeah.
But it's not just the politicians and the consultants driving this chaos. The sources also highlight the billionaires who are quietly funding all of this behind the scenes.
Yes. The notes bring up names like Paul Singer, John Paulson, and Miriam Adelson. These are some of the wealthiest, most influential mega donors in the country.
Okay.
And the investigative sources make a very pointed, very crucial observation about them. These billionaires do not care about the morality of the candidates they fund. They do not care about the scandals, the indictments, or the petty feuds.
If they don't care about the actual people running, why are they pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into this absolute mess?
Because to them, it's like a giant high-stakes trading card game. But instead of kids trading rare Charizard or Pikachu cards on the playground, these billionaires are trading favors. They want massive corporate tax breaks. They want environmental regulations dropped so their companies can operate cheaper. They want direct access to the people who write the laws of the country. They are funding the chaos of the game so they can control the referees.
So they look at a candidate like Ken Paxton, and they don't care if the player on the field is a good person, a terrible person, or someone wrapped in scandal. They just care that the player's wearing their jersey, owes them a favor, and will pass them the ball when they call for it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of how Washington operates, this is exactly what people mean when they use the phrase the swamp.
Right.
The swamp isn't a physical place. It isn't a specific building in Washington, D.C., and it isn't a particular demographic of people. The swamp is a behavior.
I really like that framing. The swamp is a behavior. It's an action.
It is what happens when money and power create a completely closed loop. The politicians desperately need the billionaires' money to buy the TV ads to win the elections. The billionaires desperately need the politicians' power to change the laws to make more money.
The perfect circle.
They trade with each other back and forth, up and down, entirely insulated from the real world. And in that closed, self-serving loop, they completely and totally forget about the everyday citizens they are actually supposed to be serving.
And it is vital to point out, as the sources explicitly do, that this cynical behavior, this trading of favors, this swamp behavior, it is not just a Republican problem. It is not just a right-wing issue.
Not at all.
The investigative notes specifically detail that this exact same dynamic of mega donors controlling politicians happens on the left as well. It is a deeply entrenched, bipartisan issue of power protecting power.
It is the historical nature of imperial cities, as the sources beautifully phrase it. Throughout human history, whether it was Rome, London, or Washington, D.C., wherever immense centralized power is concentrated, this trading up of money and influence inevitably occurs. It is a systemic feature of the architecture, not a bug of any single political party.
Which is incredibly depressing on one hand, but on the other hand, it is highly clarifying. It makes you realize that when you watch the evening news and you see politicians screaming at each other at a podium, they aren't actually yelling about us or our problems.
No.
They're just yelling about their own internal power rankings and trying to secure their spot on the bus.
And that reality of how power is actually wielded at the top, or in many cases, how it is not wielded at all, brings us to our final area of exploration, the reality of the vice presidency.
Right. Let's switch gears.
We are going to look at the historical nature of the job, specifically focusing on the recent discussions surrounding Kamala Harris.
The sources briefly discuss Kamala Harris writing a book about her rapid 107-day sprint taking over the presidential ticket. And the reaction to this book from political insiders is fascinating.
It really is.
James Carville, a very famous, very blunt political consultant, is quoted in the sources heavily criticizing the book. He called it a grievance tour. He felt she was complaining way too much about being handed a mess by Joe Biden and being treated poorly by the political system.
Now, setting aside the specific political policies of the Biden-Harris administration, which we are not here to evaluate or debate, the sources used this moment to examine the actual historical day-to-day job of being the vice president of the United States.
Yeah.
And historically speaking, across centuries and across parties, it is an absolutely awful job.
The sources quote John Adams, the very first vice president of the United States, who famously wrote to his wife that the vice presidency was the most insignificant, worst job that humanity ever created.
And if you look at the Constitution, he wasn't far off. The vice president really only has 2 actual jobs written into the founding document.
Only 2.
Number 1, sit in the Senate and break tie votes if it's 50-50. Number 2, wait around, stay alive, and wait for the president to either die or become incapacitated. That is the entire job description.
That is wild to think about. Okay, explain the reality of the vice presidency to a 10-year-old.
Imagine you are on a highly competitive soccer team. The coach hands you a special jersey that says co-captain. It sounds incredibly important. Your parents are so proud taking pictures of you in the jersey. But when the actual game starts, the coach tells you to go sit on the bench. You are the backup goalie.
And you just sit there. You don't get to run plays.
You sit there, freezing cold, watching everyone else play the game. The only time the coach ever puts you in the game is if the main goalie makes a terrible, catastrophic mistake or gets severely injured.
Okay.
And if that nightmare scenario happens and you finally get put in, the other team is already scoring, the fans are booing loudly, and suddenly everyone in the stadium is yelling at you for the mess you just inherited.
You get all the blame for the hardest, most unwinnable jobs. Like the sources mention Harris being handed the incredibly difficult, politically toxic issue of the border, but you get absolutely none of the glory when things go right.
Exactly.
When the economy booms or a big bill passes, the main goalie holds the trophy while you stand in the background clapping.
You are given the political tasks the president doesn't want to touch because they are guaranteed to make people angry. And if you fail at them, it's entirely your fault.
No.
But if you somehow succeed, the president takes the victory lap.
But wait, I have to push back here. The worst job humanity ever created? Come on, we were talking about the Vice President of the United States.
I know, it sounds ridiculous.
They get to fly on Air Force Two, which is a massive private jet. They have a 20-car motorcade that stops traffic wherever they go. They get a beautiful historic mansion to live in at the Naval Observatory. They have Secret Service bodyguards carrying their bags. Is it really that bad to be the backup goalie if you get all the free snacks, the best seat on the bench,
Yeah.
and you never actually have to block a shot unless there's an emergency?
It is a job of immense, almost unfathomable privilege. No one is arguing that these people are suffering in a literal physical sense, but politically and psychologically, it is a trap.
A trap.
And the sources point out the specific danger of how a vice president handles a loss. Carville's harsh criticism of the grievance tour highlights a brutal truth about the psychology of the American public.
Which is what? What does the public demand?
As the sources brilliantly phrase it, the stink of loss is a hard one to shower off. When a high-level politician loses a major national election, the public absolutely does not want to hear them complain about how unfair the rules were, how the referees were biased against them, or how they were handed a bad hand by their predecessor.
Even if it's completely true. Even if they really were treated terribly by the media or the party.
Even if it is 100% historically true, the American public loves a redemption story. They love a comeback. But the absolute prerequisite for a comeback in American politics is contrition.
Right.
The public requires leaders to stand up, take the microphone, and say, I messed up, I misunderstood the country, I didn't play well enough, and I own that. They require the leader to take the hit on the chin. If you just write a book complaining about the refs and how hard your job was, you look weak.
You look like a kid who lost the video game and threw the controller across the room, screaming that the game was glitched and the controller was broken. Nobody wants to play with that kid again.
Precisely. The vice presidency forces you to be subservient, to absorb the blame for the administration's failures, and to constantly defend someone else's record. And if you lose, you have to absorb that loss silently and gracefully if you ever want a chance to be the main goalie in the future. It is a psychological tightrope that very few people can walk successfully.
It really is. And looking at the history of the office, this dynamic isn't just about Kamala Harris. It's about Mike Pence. It's about Al Gore. It's about George H.W. Bush.
Yes, it's systemic.
The sources recount stories of past vice presidents literally fighting for basic office space in the West Wing and begging for respect from the president's staff. The system is fundamentally designed to make the backup goalie invisible until they are needed as a human shield.
It is another prime example of how the adult rules, the institutional rules, operate on a completely different frequency than what we are taught is fair when we are kids. The system requires a scapegoat, and the vice president is structurally built to be exactly that.
Which brings us to the end of today's journey. Let's briefly recap what we've unpacked here, because it has been a massive amount of information.
It really has.
We started with the heartbreaking, shadowy mystery of Katie Johnson, a Jane Doe using a superhero mask and a fake parking lot address to try and tell the truth, only to vanish into the shadows when the bully's fixers and investigators showed up at her door.
We examined the terrifying architecture of Jeffrey Epstein's trap, showing how predators systematically weaponize poverty and use the illusion of a sweet, safe mother figure to lure vulnerable girls into a Venus flytrap they can never escape.
We looked at the deeply cynical games played by politicians in Washington. From the Speaker of the House yelling recess, to flip the board game over, to the DOJ cutting names out of the secret diary with white digital blocks, to billionaires trading favors like baseball cards to control the referees of our economy.
And we finally looked at the bench, exploring how even those at the very top of the political pyramid, like the vice president, are often just pawns trapped in a system of blame, required to smile while they freeze on the sidelines waiting for a disaster.
So why does this matter to you, the listener? Why spend an hour swimming in these murky, cynical, often depressing waters?
Because knowledge is the only actual antidote to manipulation. When we take the time to understand how the game is actually played, when we see the pyramid schemes, the FOIA redactions, and the consultant feuds for what they really are, we stop feeling confused and overwhelmed by the news.
Right.
We stop taking the political theater at face value. We start seeing the invisible strings pulling the puppets.
We realize that the monsters aren't hiding under the bed. They're wearing expensive suits, they are changing the congressional calendar, and they're paying off the fixers. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own as you go about your day. When we were 10 years old, the fundamental rule of the playground, the bedrock of our understanding of the world, was that the rules applied to everyone equally. If you did something wrong, you faced the consequences. But as we've seen today, looking at the world of the ultra-powerful, if the people who write the rule book are the exact same people breaking the rules, who exactly is supposed to put them in timeout? Is true justice even possible in a system built this way, or is it up to us to build a totally new playground?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time. Keep asking the hard questions.